people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the mother relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Reigning undisputed junior middleweight champion Charlo says the face of boxing has got to be Gervonta Davis.
No, it isn't.
You need me to tell you that Gervonta Davis has not exceeded Canelo Alvarez in terms of accolades, accomplishments, or commercial viability?
You need me to tell you that there's no area of this sport where Gervonta Davis has surpassed Canelo Alvarez.
America's got the best fighters in the world the last few years, Charlo told NBA forward Stephen Jackson in a recent episode of the Fight Towns on Showtime Sport. Our GOAT, greatest of all time, was Muhammad Ali.
Our now GOAT is Floyd Mayweather.
How do you beat them? Our eras are different. I think truly right now, though, the face of boxing has got to probably be Gervonta Davis to me. Right now, if you think about who's really conquered the new world, selling out every fight, he's performing well, everybody wants to stay focused on the negativity, but he's grinding his ass off.
You're full of shit.
The only reason you're nominating that butterball as the new face of boxing is due to ethnic, racial, and national sentiments.
Which have fuck all to do with being the face of boxing. Being the face of boxing is actually about marquee value.
Who generates the most? Generates the most interest, the most metrics, the most money in the sport of boxing, and that's not Gervonta Davis.
Gervonta doesn't hold the indoor attendance record in this country. Canelo does. Gervonta Davis doesn't have a 3-fight deal worth a sum total of over $100 million.
If Gervonta really were the face of boxing, Jermel would have to reconcile why it is Al Heyman is guaranteeing Canelo more money than the face of boxing, quote unquote. Psst.
It's because he's not the face of boxing.
He's a souped-up hype job, is what he is. And some would prefer that Gervonta Davis be the face of boxing, dethrone Canelo as the biggest name in the sport due to nationalist, ethnic, and racial sentiments.
But what you have in common with him has fuck all to do with being the face of boxing. If he were the face of boxing, how come he's not on the Forbes list and Canelo is?
These guys are over the moon that Gervonta Davis's fight with Ryan Garcia sold in excess of 1 million pay-per-view buys, as if Canelo Alvarez doesn't have several pay-per-views that sold in excess of 1 million.
He got out there with a little-known guy to the Americans in John Ryder and was still able to sell 450,000 pay-per-view buys, which is more, far more, than your average Gervonta Davis pay-per-view. The question now is,
what the fuck is wrong with these guys?
Tribalism.
There's some out there who think they're championing a cause by pointing out the biases in others without addressing the biases within themselves. And it's tribalism, mostly, that motivates this obtuse and delusional behavior.
Second ahead.
They'll claim that me and you were biased for sticking to the facts by the numbers, as this is a numbers game, and the face of boxing has everything to do with what the numbers show. But if we mull over these facts,
guys are gonna get upset about it. Start up with the ad hominem attacks, the personal insults.
Go as far as calling you bigoted or racist if you don't fall in line with their worldview or their view of the sport of boxing, even if all the actual evidence is to the contrary.
They believe goes against logic, and you can't waste good logic on illogical people. Thankfully, I don't attempt to.
It's these individuals themselves, Gervonta Davis's core supporters, that like to pick fights and arguments with random strangers online, trying to impose their worldview or their view of boxing onto others, and they fail every time.
Failures.
They are failures in life, living vicariously through a souped-up hype job on the premise that they have something in common with him.
Who cares?
Canelo Alvarez isn't the face of boxing because I'm a fan of him or because I support his career. He's the face of boxing irrespective of what I think. He's the face of boxing because of his commercial value. He's the face of boxing because Al Heyman is guaranteeing him more money than any of those other PBC fighters.
That's why he's the face of boxing, and it's why Gervonta Davis ain't shit.
Nothing. And every other PBC fighter in that stable they plan on putting in the ring with Canelo Alvarez is little more than cannon fodder. Sacrificial lambs. Tribute to the true face of boxing.
One true face of boxing!
Al Heyman. must bend the knee and sacrifice Jermall Charlo to the one true face of boxing, Canelo Alvarez. He couldn't get that guy to do nothing, absolutely nothing for the last 2 years, but the moment that Canelo comes around, he serves him up to Canelo on a platter like he's supposed to.
Fucking right.
You even have this conversation with one of these mongoloids. What they resort to being is obtuse and childish.
As if that's gonna win him the debate.
As if this even is a debate. Is it really a debate who's sold more pay-per-views in this country? Who's got the bigger audience? Who makes more money per fight?
As if Gervonta Davis' success in his last fight is gonna be the same every fight moving forward.
You only sold what you sold in your last fight because you had Ryan Garcia to help you. If you end up opposite the ring and Isaac Cruz again...
You're not doing a million buys.
Or Rolly Romero again.
You're not doing a million buys.
You realize he could go as far as fighting Devin Haney in his next fight or Shakur Stevenson, and it wouldn't do what Canelo versus Charlo is about to do.
Congratulations, you cracked $1 million for the first time in your career. Now, how many opponents out there are left where you can do that again?
Canelo has several. Canelo has plenty, but what about Gervonta?
Piece of shit.
Not the face of boxing just because of some tenuous association delusional fanboys are making with him.
You kidding?
Canelo is the face of boxing. Do you understand that fucking shit?
You better understand it because he's the only thing holding the PBC afloat this year.
And next year, you fucking morons. Tribalism. Tribalism in the sport is devoid of logic. Tribalism in the sport is not
Exclusive.
specific to any one group of people, exclusive to any one demographic. I remember some of the worst tribalism was in the buildup of the Mayweather versus Pacquiao fight. Mayweather and Pacquiao fans alike taking shots at each other, low blows.
Things got nasty.
If you're telling yourself that Gervonta Davis is the face of boxing, not Canelo Alvarez, tribalism is likely why. Canelo Alvarez himself, he's getting ready to pounce on Jermall Charlo, a useless absentee champion that hasn't been making the PBC any money the last 2 years.
His entire career is of no value to the middleweight division or the sport of boxing as a whole. The only value he has is as a body to put in the ring with Canelo.
That applies to Jermall Charlo the same way it applies to Demetrius Andrade, the same way it applies to David Benavidez, because had Canelo decided not to go over to the PBC side of things, what fights were you going to put these fighters in that would have resulted in big cash and big pay-per-view buys?
You'd think if David Benavidez would have went ahead with that David Morrell fight, it would have got more buys than the Plant fight?
A little-known Cuban fighter with only 9 professional bouts. I'm not telling you he's a bad fighter. I'm telling you he has no commercial value. Not right now. If you would have made that pay-per-view between him and David Benavidez, it wouldn't have sold nothing.
Nada.
A pay-per-view between Demetrius Andrade and Jermall Charlo, their long-standing rivalry, that would have been a good fight for the hardcores, but not the casuals. The casuals don't watch them.
That's the truth.
Canelo Alvarez adds value to fights with those fighters. They cannot add themselves.
Take Canelo out of the equation. Mix and match the names. You won't get a big money fight.
Not those guys, not with those guys, not them fighting each other, but them fighting Canelo, which is what the PBC has always wanted. They've always wanted him to stay on their side of the street so that he can take on their assembly line of B, C, and D-level fighters.
Jermall Charlo is a D-level fighter.
What, you don't think he's a D-level fighter 2 years removed from the sport of boxing? Look at how he looked the last time we saw him, opposite the ring Juan Macias Montiel, the kind of guy that an elite-level fighter is expected to take on and expected to take out. He couldn't do it because he sucks.
He's a low-level boxer puncher that's often hyped up by individuals due to tribalist sentiments more than boxing.
And he's gonna get his fucking ass kicked. I don't pity him.
He had the chance to fight Canelo many years ago when Oscar De La Hoya first offered this fight, and since then, we've seen enough anecdotal evidence that the offer was a genuine offer when his sparring partner went on The Boxing Voice.
In his own words, saying that the offer to fight Canelo was a real offer. Not only was it a real offer, but Charlo turned it down when him and his brother were having that quarrel in 2020, and Jermell let it be known that he's Jermell Charlo, not Jermall Charlo. He'd never turn down a Canelo fight.
Like his brother did.
And some still hold to the narratives they've propagated the last few years now, claiming that Canelo's only fighting Jermall because he's been out of action for so long.
Well, he offered this guy to fight, whether you want to believe it or not.
He already offered this guy to fight years ago, and if Jermall wanted to stay on his side of the street instead of capitalizing on that opportunity back when he was a more active fighter, that's just a tough titty.
Just your fucking problem, sweetheart.
The last 2 years, his inactivity hasn't stopped his few supporters, what few supporters he has from claiming that Canelo is avoiding this fighter, so that as soon as Canelo goes to fight him, you start up with the fucking excuses.
Cowards.
No other way to put it. These guys are not in the business of fights that are actually going to happen. They're in the business of bumping their gums over fights they don't think are going to happen, so that as soon as they do, they come out with the excuses.
Cowards.
There was never anything special about Charlo, even when he was a more active fighter than he is today. I grade him as a maybe B- to a C+ boxer puncher. Canelo's a boxer puncher.
With an affinity for counterpunching.
Canelo's a boxer puncher, but a boxer puncher of a higher tier, a much higher grade than a Charlo.
He's gonna stop him.
He's gonna stop Charlo, who's been out of action for the last 2 years. In truth, Jamal's got a decent jab, but not so good a jab that he doesn't get touched up by lesser fighters and lesser opponents than Canelo Alvarez. Matvey Korobov was touching him up. He couldn't miss him with the straight left hand. Juan Macias Montiel.
He lumped him up, landed good combinations in the pocket.
How'd Juan Macias end up getting past his jab the way he's getting combinations off in the pocket?
Because Jamal's jab's not that good.
After 2 years of making excuses to stay away from the ring, his timing is going to be off, his cardio,
Conditioning's gonna be off.
he'll be second best. He'll always be one step behind Canelo Alvarez. And this migration from Matchroom over to the PBC reminds me of Manny Pacquiao's migration from Top Rank over to the PBC. He looked an old, war-torn fighter his last fight under Top Rank, but when he got over to the PBC, he seemed a rejuvenated fighter that found the fountain of youth, when really, he just found out those PBC guys ain't that good.
That's it.
Like Canelo's about to find out. Why do you think that Canelo, a smaller fighter, a much smaller man than David Benavidez, was able to rack up a highlight reel knockout over Caleb Plant, but David Benavidez couldn't? David, who's bigger and younger, he's supposed to be stronger.
Not strong enough to stop Caleb Plant.
Don't give me the nonsense about the holding. It's up to David Benavidez to create space. Push that guy off and get punches in there. That's up to him. And at 6'2", he's supposed to be able to do that.
It's a hype job.
So is Charlo. The silver lining for the PBC is that alongside Canelo, they can stage several successful box office fights involving these fighters that they could not otherwise stage. Let's be honest, Jamal hasn't been making the PBC any money the last 2 years, and he hasn't been bringing Showtime any metrics.
Because he hasn't been fighting. He's useless.
The most use you can get out of him is as cannon fodder for Canelo Alvarez to kick off his 3-fight campaign, and I'm looking forward to it.
Time to take out the trash.
Men's heavyweight news. Dillian Whyte has declared that he's not happy with certain aspects of the contract for the Anthony Joshua rematch on August 12th. He doesn't want a rematch clause because if he wins, he hopes to take AJ's place and fight Deontay Wilder in December in Saudi.
Wants to get his hands on some of that Saudi money. The problem is this hierarchy of thought requires you to count your chickens before they're hatched.
In many ways it does, because you go screwing around with Anthony Joshua and sandbagging it. You know what might happen? You don't make it to Saudi because you don't make it to AJ.
You're worried about some other fight, a fight that would presumably take place after the Joshua fight, but you go screwing around with these people and you won't get the AJ fight or the Wilder fight.
You won't get either. That's the problem when guys get in front of Anthony Joshua. They like to pretend. They like to tell themselves that he's not who he is. But he's the only other guy qualified to call himself one of the faces of boxing, one of only 2 boxers that graces the Forbes list. It's your opportunity to capitalize on, not his. You're replaceable.
Truth hurts.
What's stopping Anthony Joshua from moving on? What's stopping Anthony from saying, this guy's giving me a hard time, and I ain't got time for this. I want to hurry up and schedule a fight, pin this down, so I can move into that Wilder fight. They've got other guys in the queue.
Dillian doesn't like it, but
what are you gonna do? Dillian Whyte stated, what I don't like is Eddie Hearn's out here talking nonsense. Oh, we've got 2 other guys waiting to go. Just shut up. No one cares who you've got ready to go. It's a proper fight. Let's get the fight made.
you're the one sandbagging it.
I ain't got nothing against Dillian Whyte, and I know that he is a fighter that is of some value. I mean, there are a lot of other heavyweights out there, not named Anthony Joshua, who would love to get Dillian in the ring because Dillian puts asses in the seats. Dillian sells tickets. To some extent, he's a box office draw unto himself in the United Kingdom. So I get where he's coming from. You have to value yourself to some degree, but you don't want to play Russian roulette with these people.
You'll end up shooting yourself in the foot.
You might cost yourself an opportunity, this opportunity, sandbagging it, because you're not their focus, and their focus isn't even an August 12th tick-over fight. Their focus is making it to Saudi in December.
That's it.
A lot has changed since both these guys fought for the first time in the pro ranks. Dillian Whyte is now trained by Buddy McGirt here in America. Anthony Joshua is now being trained by Derek James.
These are different versions of these fighters than when they first fought, the both of them. Perhaps they're both more cautious now, having been stopped.
Dillian Whyte's been stopped something like, 3 times? He got stopped by Alexander Povetkin, stopped by Tyson Fury.
Stopped by Anthony Joshua years ago.
Anthony's only ever been stopped once, even though in some people's eyes it seems like more than that. He's developed a reputation as not having the best punch resistance, when in reality, he's only ever been stopped once.
Wilder's been stopped more times than this guy.
Dropped more times than this guy over the years, though you'd never know it based on perception, based on what people say, which is a deviation from reality. In reality, Anthony's only ever been knocked out once.
Not too keen on this fight, this rematch, but I'll take it.
Said that before. I'd prefer to see Anthony in there with Filip Hrgovic or maybe Otto Wallin in August. The problem is that those are dicey fights and Chency fights. If the focus is making it to a December showdown with Deontay, they do have to tread carefully. So I understand the logic behind pursuing a Dillian Whyte rematch. At minimum, Anthony wouldn't be in unfamiliar territory. He's fought that guy before, knocked that guy out before. This would be Dillian Whyte's second fight with Buddy McGirt in his corner, Anthony Joshua's second fight with Derek James in his corner. Both very good corners, very good trainers.
Saw Dillian Whyte employ the old cross guard in his last fight, the fight with Jermaine Franklin. The old cross guard, which is an adequate defense from uppercuts. We know Dillian's a sucker for an uppercut.
It's a good guard to defend from uppercuts, from punches you don't see that are coming from below that might split a high guard.
Know that every single time Dillian's been knocked out, it's been by an uppercut in the Joshua fight, in the Povetkin fight, in the Fury fight.
Literally every single time. I think that's a testament to Buddy McGirt's work with Dillian Whyte, that he employs the old cross guard. Haven't seen that since the days of George Foreman, the second phase of Big George's career.
Old school.
Still favor Anthony Joshua to beat this guy, but will he beat him in similar fashion to how he beat him before, showing that same spite and malice and rancor? If he doesn't, that's not encouraging for a December showdown with Deontay, because what people want from Anthony is to see the killer again, the hitter again.
It's not a guarantee he looks better in the rematch. Michael Hunter didn't look better in his rematch with Jerry Forrest.
Looked worse. I shudder to think that Anthony might not have the same dog in him to dispatch Dillian Whyte the same way that he did before.
We can only hope. Derek James seems like a good fit to me. Seems like the right trainer for Anthony Joshua.
Dillian aspires to make it to Saudi Arabia in beating Anthony Joshua, and his issue is Anthony has a rematch clause, but that's common knowledge that if you're fighting AJ, there's gonna be a rematch clause. That's just the way it is. You don't like it?
Hit the fucking bricks.
Hit the road, because you know what time it is, and you know who the A-side fighter here is.
You want to play dumb by yourself.
They'll move on. You think they won't? They've moved on before. If this rematch were to collapse, it would be the second time the rematch has collapsed.
Remember, after Jarrell Miller tested positive for all those banned substances, they explored a second fight with Dillian and it fell apart because he didn't like the terms.
Want to miss out on this opportunity twice?
Guys get in front of AJ and try to pretend he's not worth all the money that he's worth.
Trying to beat him in the boardroom, they never get him into the ring.